Hey everyone, my name is Chris and welcome to the RideShare Guy. And today we're going to be doing something a little bit different because we're going to be reacting to a podcast show that was talking about Prop 30 in California, which is a Lyft-backed initiative. And we all know these backed initiatives from these gig companies like Uber, Lyft, Doordash, and others when it came to Prop 22 to sway voters to keep the classification of independent contractors and pretty much try to overturn AB 5, which would have created some sort of employment model or ABC model test to see if you're really an independent contractor or an employee. So this is where Prop 22 came in, and these companies threw in hundreds of millions of dollars to try to sway voters to vote yes on Prop 22. Well, this year, new prop comes around, and Lyft is a major financial backer of this particular ballot measure, which is called Prop 30, and this is also in California. So we're going to be reacting to what is Prop 30, as well as this little podcast snippet from the All In podcast. So let's get right into it. First off, what is Prop 30? Well, it's a California proposition that would impose a 1.75% personal income tax increase on top earning Californians for their share of income above $2 million per year to fund a suite of climate programs. And the goal is to clean up the state's dirty air and help meet these greenhouse reduction targets. So the proposition creates a rev stream of subsidizing zero-emission vehicles and fund wildfire response and prevention between $3.5 billion to $5 billion annually, growing over time. And they say most of the money, about 80%, would go towards rebates for people buying zero-emission cars to help these charging stations, and half of the funding will go to low and middle income residents who are disproportionately affected by poor air quality and heavy pollution. The state already spends millions each year on zero emission vehicle programs and dedicated an additional $10 billion over the next 5 years to the programs in the year's budget. So there is a lot going on. And this is kind of a weird proposition here because you think it sounds great. Yes, let's put more money towards, helping the environment. But when you look at it, Lyft is a major backer on this. They've put, tens of millions of dollars towards this ballot initiative because they're in favor. And then you have these California politicians that are against it. So I don't know if it's just because the fight of Prop 22, beyond that, I live in New York State, so we have our own Prop 1, I believe it is, on tomorrow's ballot, which is talking about, these types of initiatives, Clean Air Initiative and all that. So if you're in California and know more about it, definitely drop a couple of comments below exactly, what the breakdown fully is of this. Because like I say, it sounds good, but in reality, is it really good? And that's kind of like the Prop 22 position. You look at it and it's like, oh, this is really good because it's going to keep my freedom and flexibility, and it's going to keep rideshare prices low. But in reality, it's not that great. And, prices rose anyways when it came to the passenger side, and drivers aren't making much more or feeling positive benefits when it came to it. It's not something like Seattle's model, which is so much better. So, like I say, if you have more info on Prop 30, and if you're in California, please have something, because one of the big things is tomorrow's election day. Go out and vote. And if you're watching this on Tuesday, go out and vote. But either way, always want to make sure you go out and vote. So I'm not going to tell you who or what to vote for, but again, if you have more info with Prop 30, just drop it in. So let's take a look real quick at the All In podcast. Special shout out to these guys here. They like to kind of look back and see what's going on and talk about it from a financial perspective. So let's take a look at that now.
Real quick, there's a proposition here in California where we vote on specific ballot measures. Not every state has this, but we have Prop 30 coming out. This is a 1.75% tax on incomes earned over $2 million for the next 20 years in California, which, by the way, had a $100 billion surplus that would go towards clean energy. This was proposed originally by environmental groups, but Newsom has come out to battle against this, which would seem counterintuitive because he's so pro-environment. What this would do is spend about 80% of this $100 billion in new tax revenue over the next 20 years. 80% would go towards charging stations for EVs and motivating customers to buy EVs. 20% would go to combat the crazy amount of wildfires we're having here. He, Gavin Newsom, that is, called this a cynical scheme devised by a single corporation, Lyft, to funnel state income tax revenue to their company, Lyft.
I'm just going to stop it right here real quick. Yeah, you could kind of see that. It's one company that's really backing this. They put a ton of money behind this ballot initiative. And you could say and argue that companies do this all the time, but this is very peculiar for Lyft because they're dumping tens of millions of dollars. I think it's somewhere between 30 or $50 million, something absolutely insane. Uber, on the other hand, said, we're going to stand this one out. So they haven't even touched this. They haven't put any money towards for or against it. And then you see they're trying to get money taxed to be able to fund EV purchases. So drivers will be able to switch to EVs, at least in California, not necessarily the rest of the country, with even Lyft's ambitious goals. But the other thing is they spend all of this money. There's two factors that I have a problem with, and that is you just laid off a ton of employees and you're going to see layoffs. Twitter had it, Facebook had it. All of these companies are going to have layoffs, including Lyft and Uber and all these other companies. But with that being said, why would you dump all of that money onto a prop in one state when you could have probably funded those employees and kept them on board? Whether you want to downsize or not, that's different. But the other thing is, Lyft just came out with upfront pay in several cities. A lot of what I'm seeing is they're not great offers to drivers. So why would you dump all that money when you could have put it into what you're paying your drivers? When it comes to what the passenger has to pay versus what the driver's getting, those types of things, why wasn't that money put aside for that? Either way, but it's kind of interesting to see, the state of California say, we don't want to take this on. We don't want this. And yet, like I say, it's this mind competitiveness where they're trying to say, yes, this is for the environment when it comes from a big tech company like Lyft. And then on the other side, you see these politicians that are driving this, where they're saying by 2035 and by 2040, we want all of these changes to go to electric and EVs and zero emission vehicles and stuff like that. But yet then when it comes to how they're funding it and things, whether it's the Prop 30 or something else, now you're seeing them say, well, hold on a minute. We don't want to do it this way. So again, if you have more info on Prop 30, by all means, put it in there.
Lyft has provided almost all of the almost 48 million in funding for this Prop 30. And the reason is...
So yeah, they're almost 50 million. And probably at the time of this recording, it was probably over 50 million. I don't know for sure though. But either way, it's around 50 million. A huge chunk of money.
Because California is going to require 90% of ride-sharing miles to be traveled by zero-emission vehicles in 2030. On top of that California is going to not let you sell anything other than EVs in 2035 if this continues. Now you've got a bunch of people on the other side of this doing anti-Prop 30, including the California Teachers Association, because they want the money. Reed Hastings over at Netflix, Moritz over at Sequoia, Sam Altman over at OpenAI. Well, what do you think of this, Freeberg? I'm curious.
Sorry, what side are they on, Jaco? The side
Moritz,
of Lyft?
Altman. No, they're saying don't do this because they are trying to control taxes in California.
They're on Newsom's side.
Newsom's side, hey, this is a grift by Lyft because Lyft is concerned that they're going to have to, bear the brunt of 90% of miles. So I guess I don't know if it's original sin, but the one of the levers here is Lyft has got the majority of their rides are in California. Uber has stayed out of this because they don't have as much exposure because the number of rides in California is a smaller percentage of their overall revenue. Brad, you have some thoughts too here, I think. So Freeberg or Brad?
I'm just looking.
Well, before he gets going, I'm just going to interject here because he's got a pretty good rant coming up when it comes to it. But this does raise that question, like, why are these states putting on these huge numbers saying by 2030 we want 90% traveled on EVs or zero emission? And whether you think that's good or bad for the environment, that's not really the point. The question is, why are they spending so much trying to get that money and focusing on these taxes and all these changes? But let's get into what Brad has to say, because he's got a pretty good rant coming up. So
looking at the board of directors at Lyft and thinking to myself, good God, what are these people thinking? Spending $40 to $50 million on this, it just seems that they've totally lost the script. The company has way bigger problems
laying off employees, trying to get drivers to accept rides because they're giving low-wall offers with upfront pay, go on and on.
Focus on, right? Then, this measure.
Oh, and also getting rid of the fuel surcharge because, I don't know, somebody thought that was a good idea because gas prices were going down. And the day that it ends in California, gas prices skyrocketed almost $1.50. We talked about that on Show Me the Money Club. So what's going on here? And then, Joe, our other contributor, he's talking about some of the issues that he's been facing when driving Lyft, and it's pretty much stopped him from driving Lyft with the exception of doing some research for videos like stay within area or upfront pay and these types of things. So other than that, what's going on, Lyft?
Have a little faith in the system that if we don't get to a place where this is reasonably practical over the next 10 years, then I'm sure we will evolve, right? The legislation around this. Kudos to Dara and the team at Uber for not running scared on this, right? For not trying to push this through. These corporate governance initiatives guised as referendums in this state. I mean, this is just bad politics, bad policy. I mean, we got Valerie Jarrett on the board of this company. You got political sophistication on the board of this company. I want to be, I wish I was a fly on the wall. I want to know the conversation that went down and who raised their hand and said, this is the highest and best use of $40 million of our money.
Crazy. Yeah,
right?
Makes no sense. Freeberg, you have thoughts on you've talked before about how you think the free market should solve these things.
What is the governance structure at Lyft, guys?
I knew that was coming. I knew it was coming.
Did they have super voting shares? Yeah.
Anybody look?
I don't know the answer to that.
So I think that the tax rate in California is high enough now that we all have friends in our poker group who have left for the state of Texas or the state of Florida.
Okay, I'm going to end it there because essentially that is pretty much the chunk of talking about Lyft and Prop 30 and the state of California. Then it goes into all the taxes and talking about taxes. So that was a little segment from the All In podcast. If you want to check that out, I'll leave a link in the description. But what is your thoughts on Prop 30? What's your thoughts on Lyft spending almost, or if not more than $50 million on a ballot initiative in California to try to get more taxes on people so they can fund these different EV programs in order for these crazy goals, essentially, to try to get 90% of all miles traveled on zero emission or EV vehicles. And again, it's not the point of having an EV or not. I think if you have one, it's great right now. But if you're adding so much more, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. Like, how are you going to be able to supply enough charge for people who have to plug in vehicles on top of air conditioning and other uses of electricity when they're already having problems with rolling blackouts in California, with Newsom saying don't charge your vehicles because of this. So there's a lot of things that they should all be sitting down at the table trying to figure out instead of just, trying to kick the can down the road, so to speak. So those are my thoughts on this particular instance. Again, if you're in California, what's your thoughts on this? What do you think about Prop 30? Do you think that this is a good use of Lyft's money? Do you think that they should put it somewhere else, like, driver pay, compensation, more to keeping some of their employees employed versus laying them off because they just spent that amount of money? What's your thoughts? Comment below and let us know. And lastly, if you are in the US and watching this on Monday or Tuesday, November 7th or 8th, then make sure you get out and vote. All right, and with that being said, drive smart, everyone.